Yeah, does the president have the authority under statute or inherently to say for a short period of time to a power company, here's the deal, you're not going to divert power from NSA. These are your first priority customers, and you have no choice.
As I've been saying all day long, he has no statutory authority in almost any of these areas. He cannot direct a private sector enterprise to do X or Y, except in very rare circumstances, and I'm unaware of any authority that would fix, for example, the NSA's
does Article 2 give him
problem.
that?
So, he's the commander-in-chief. Article 2 says that is his job, and I believe that he has to assert that authority, and where necessary for our national security, make those orders. I would like to have a joining of hands by the legislative branch on that issue, and I would like to see the president explaining the reasonableness of what he's doing, the fact that there is nothing less intrusive that he can do to keep us safe, and asking essentially retroactively for his actions to be ratified.
The electrical system in this country is not capable of being nationalized and operated as one system. It is over 3,000 systems out there, each of which has its own generation and distribution, etc. You can have some general rules of the road. You can say you must serve the Department of Defense first, you must serve other loads first, but you cannot operate it from one central control system in the White House. It just can't be done.
You know, I would remind people that President Truman tried to nationalize the steel industry in World War II, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't. So this is, we don't abandon the Constitution in these circumstances, and the president's going to have to deal with that possibility.
I'm going to have to go up and see the president in about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes or so. So I'd like to frame kind of a summary of where we have been in talking about the issues we've discussed today, both the original cyber attack and the follow-on attack with respect to power. I'd like to once again get everybody's best view on what is the short-term fix, but then I'd also like to look at what do we tell the American people about why this is not going to happen again. Or are we going to have to tell them this is going to happen all the time, get used to living in a country where you're constantly unable to communicate and unable to turn your electric lights on. So this is one of those moments before you walk into the Oval Office where you're going to have to be willing to tell the president this is a course of action that is bold but may get you in trouble after the fact is overreaching. Or you may want me to go in and say to the president, look, here's what you've got to do to not get overreacting, and it may mean that we're going to have to muddle along for a while, but in the long run, you'll be able to say, look, I didn't touch on anything that is of civil liberties concern. So I ask you to explicitly address those issues as you talk about the way forward on these problems.
Up next, grappling with the power of the president.
The risk of second guessing is not that people will say, you did too much, you went beyond your authority. We will be criticized if we do not do everything that we can.
I'm Don Lemon. Here's what's happening right now. Ron Paul has gotten a nod of approval from conservative activists at a CPAC meeting. The Texas congressman got the most support for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination in an unofficial straw poll on Saturday. He received 31% of the vote. In second place, former presidential hopeful Mitt Romney. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin was third.
What do we tell the American people about why this is not going to happen again? Or are we going to have to tell them this is going to happen all the time, get used to living in a country where you're constantly unable to communicate and unable to turn your electric lights on?
I am absolutely with you on the point that we have to have the National Guard mobilized not only to secure areas in the energy grid, but other areas that we think, if there is a concerted attack on the U.S., which this certainly looks like, may be vulnerable. And certainly we have to try to make sure that Congress is on board as much as possible. And I am in the school that says that he's going to have to speak to the American people very candidly about the fact that in the world we're in today, we are at risk for this type of thing, and we can't give them easy comfort. But we're going to have some shared determination and sacrifice here.
Let me ask you, in the long run, what does this tell us about whether we have properly struck the balance between what the government can do and what the private sector does in a moment of crisis or emergency? Do we have the mechanisms, or do we need to create mechanisms to allow the federal government to step in and do some extraordinary things for a short period of time?
I am hearing loud and clear, just in the description from the Attorney General, that there are authorizations that we need to have that we don't have. And this is very much analogous to what's happened in the financial sector, where the regulator stepped in and did some very aggressive things and I think very constructively. But it's quite clear now that we need mechanisms there so that you don't have to have the same degree of improvisation. And we shouldn't be debating the next time something like this happens, and the odds are very strong there will be a next time. We shouldn't be debating whether the president has the authority to basically say, metaphorically, cars with faulty brakes that are a danger on the highways have to be recalled and fixed. I mean, we should just go through and have that kind of authority.
All right, cyber coordinator, Stuart.
The risk of second guessing is not that people will say, you did too much, you went beyond your authority. We will be criticized if we do not do everything that we can. And people will recognize that we are going to have to straighten out the authorities over time.
Let me ask you two questions, though, to press you on this, because I'm sure the president's going to ask me about this. First of all, some of what you want us to do involves getting people and institutions to use the tools they already have, patches, antiviral software, and actually simply download them and implement them. And a lot of people don't do it. How do you make them do it? And do you say, instead of asking them voluntarily to do it, do you simply make them do it by doing it from a remote location? In other words, do you have the ISPs and the telecoms make people or download it on their own volition, even if people don't do it themselves?
None of us can log on to our government computer networks without going through a set of security checks that are performed on the systems, on the computers that we're trying to log in. Increasingly, as the internet becomes subject to these sorts of attacks, people are going to have to demonstrate that what they are trying to hook up to the public network has been secured in some fashion. And the internet service providers are going to end up trying to make sure that people who are hooking up to the network are not posing a threat to that network.
And here's my second question then. If we go down that road, what happens the next time the president meets with the premier of China, or if we ever meet with the leadership of Iran and they say, wow, great, you're sitting on top of your internet the same way we're sitting on top of our internet, so we all agree the government ought to control what comes across the internet. Isn't that argument going to be thrown in our face when we have activists in the U.S. trying to communicate with democracy advocates in Iran and other places in the world?
Those governments are going to do what those governments want to do, and whether we've created a talking point or not for them in the discussions, I think, is not relevant to what they will actually end up doing. We have got to defend ourselves. Nothing looks worse to the international community than that map. We look weak and unable to help anyone in the world who shares our values. We've got to solve that problem first.
Let me turn to Homeland Security. In terms of the mechanism for coordinating the response here and getting all the various entities, federal, state, local, private sector involved, are you satisfied, based on what we've seen here today, that we can tell the president the architecture is right, or do we need to have some override that allows a unified response in a catastrophic event like the kind we have here?
I think that the sector system that we have in place worked the way it was expected to work. It wasn't built for a catastrophic event. And so do I think that you need an override? The answer is yes, I do. And this is, look, when you get into this magnitude of a crisis, to the Attorney General's point, we're in the better to ask forgiveness than permission. You no longer have time to be arguing the legal argument about authorities. You need to act.
Coming up, what to tell the president.
What does he say to the public in a little while when he gets out there?